And it's starting. Hello
Okay.
everyone.
Good afternoon.
This is Romain. Welcome to this webinar and the last Unity Masterclass. I'm today with Antoine.
Hi everyone.
And so we are going to talk today about a key question for Unity developers, which is how to increase ROI of consented monetization with your Unity SDK. So the real goal today is to illustrate how excellent consent management can lead to better return on investment, so to better revenue for you as a Unity developer. Yeah, let's get started.
Sure. So, as you said, today is the last webinar. The first one was more linked to the compliance, the direct compliance to the GDPR and how to set up the Didomi SDK. Now we are going to speak about how you can increase the return on invest with this kind of technology. But before starting, we're going to tell you a few words about Didomi, who we are. We're a French SaaS editor, and we are specialized in consent management. Today, we're able to provide SDK for almost all the kind of environment needed by a company. So we can help you with the web, iOS, Android, AMP, Unity, and we are even testing smart TVs SDK. To all our customers, we provide a console on which one they can do all the setup and follow the interesting metrics for them. And the idea is to provide a solution that you can really set up in the way you want to offer the best experience to your customers in many different languages and many different kind of formats. So why Didomi is really different compared to other consent management platforms? The first one is that we are one of the only companies in the world that do only that. We are really focused on consent management, and this is why we're able to provide very advanced SDK to allow very easy customization, and we are also able to provide different kind of API, for example, for analytics or for direct technical integration with advanced solution. And we also provide to our customers a very advanced documentation, technical documentation that allow you to develop your own CMP based on our technology. Initially, we were a company that was working with many media companies, in the publishing industry. But since for a few months, we saw that the market is really changing, and now Didomi is working with almost all the data-centric companies, such as e-merchant or very large companies. And even now the gaming with Gamelot, for example, are really interesting and really saw the importance of following the good KPIs on consent management. In few figures, sorry. Now our technology is deployed on more than 100K websites and apps. It means that each quarter we reach more than 2 billion different devices. And on a monthly basis, it means that we're going to read more than 50 billion consents.
Okay, so the first thing that I think is crucial to really understand the value of consent for you as an app developer is to really understand the relationship that exists between the consents that you collect and your overall monetization. Next slide, please. So what we'll show you today is that really consent and monetization are today the two sides of the same coin, in a sense that without consent, you're going to lose on your monetization. You're going to lose on your ad revenues for various reasons. The first one is that advertisers, brands, the ones that give out money to reach out to your audiences, are really paying more for like personalized ads, ads that are in their mind more relevant to the audience that they reach out to. And so eventually what's happening is that if you're able to provide ad slots with consent, you're going to make more revenue. And some studies show that you can make twice as much revenue with a consented advertising than without, which is, like, I think, a very interesting figure to have in mind when you're selecting and setting up your consent management platform. So it's really not just about complying with regulation, with GDPR or even CCPA in the US. It's much more about really nailing down your monetization, providing the best user experience possible to ensure that your consent rates are going to be maximized, and therefore you're going to make more revenue at the end of the month as a developer.
So in this webinar, we're gonna try to explain you how is it possible for you to maximize your opt-in rates or your consent rates. The first thing is to really think into the global project, and there are some best practices that you really need to assimilate. The first one is to really think about when you're gonna need the consent. I mean, it's not always needed to request for a consent for the first opening of the app. So the idea is to maybe think about that. Do I need a consent for the first opening, or do I need to deliver targeted ads since the first opening? Some of the companies are using dark patterns to collect consent in a way that can be criticized. So it can be a win in a very short-term vision, but at the end, the company are gonna get huge lack in terms of strategy on consent management, and consent management is the key for tomorrow. So that's not a huge win for that. And the idea is that also collecting consent is the very first step of the creation of a customer relationship. So the idea is that to assimilate that collecting consent is really the first step of your relationship with your users. So the idea is to really think on this approach, and do I need to collect the whole consent on a single step, or is it possible to collect the consent in several steps? So all that kind of things need to be think for all kind of apps. And this is really a strategy that need to be adopted by the companies. And once you define your strategy, the idea is that you're going to optimize or you're going to collect the consent. The easiest way is to use A/B testing. You can run A/B tests directly into the Didomi console. And the idea is that you're going to create two different banners. The first one gonna be seen by 95% of your audience, whereas 5% of your users are gonna see a different banner. And you can change only minor things such as button size or button colors, but you can also change much more things such as the format, for example. And the idea is to be able to measure the difference between both and to choose the banner that's gonna collect the highest opt-in rate by the users. So the idea is that working with small step like that, you're gonna really improve the results of your CMP.
Okay, so we've seen how to maximize your consent rates. It's the first step towards getting the most return on investment with your CMP. The second one is to look at the monetization aspect of implementing a CMP. As you realize quickly, getting like top consent rates is not enough. And if you look at this problem in a much deeper way, next slide please, you'll see that even with the best consent rates, so even with the best opt-ins, you might not maximize your revenue for various reasons. The first one is that you could have like an opt-in for a specific purpose, for like personalized ads, for instance. But if you don't have the integration with the vendor, on the other hand, so if you're not able to distribute the consent status of your user, the vendor will not receive this consent status. They will not be able to leverage that to distribute personalized advertising. So the first case is if you don't have an integration with your vendors, if you're not able to transfer them consent, you're failing, and even with the best consent rates, you're not going to maximize your revenue. The second issue that we typically see is a matter of bad timing. So a number of your ads will be loaded within your app without consent, so without the opportunity for the vendor to understand the consent status. And that clearly comes from an integration or like the wrong choice in terms of CMP partner. The last problem that we see typically for a Unity developer is that consent is collected, but the vendor is not able to read this consent. For various reasons, the way the consent is distributed is invalid. And that's where I think selecting the right partner and clearly testing integrations is critical. Next slide, please. So the good news is that on the market there are some solutions that you can leverage. CMP is one of them, which really take at heart this idea of bringing the best possible integration with your vendor ecosystem. And there are like direct integrations that we can provide, or standard integrations such as the transparency and consent framework, which are really crucial for you as an app developer, because that's how you will be able to maximize your reach. And clearly, like if you're a Unity developer, you need to make sure that, for instance, AdMob will be able to deliver personalized ads, so to bring you the highest CPM. And the best way to get there is to ensure you implement the transparency and consent framework, which is the way they use to understand consent status from their users, and which will ensure that we solve the three main issues that I just discussed. There are other like integrations that can be direct with to ensure Unity ads are also correctly distributed. But really, like the problem statement that you must have in mind as an app developer is to ensure that when you have implemented your CMP, your consent management platform, you also check for the integration side of things. So how am I going to inform my key vendors that consent is or is not collected? Next slide, please. The question becomes then, like, how to make up this list of vendor to which I'm going to send this consent status. From this choice will depend also a lot of your revenue. So if you forget one critical vendor, they may not be able to read or to understand the consent status. They may not be able to give you the highest CPM. And so really, what we see as a CMP provider is that one critical path to maximizing your revenue is to really figuring out who are the vendors that are bringing you money. And typically there are a bunch of vendors who represent more than 95% of your revenue. So let's focus on these vendors first, because they are going to bring you the more money at first. And then from this initial list, you can also expand and via test and learn, add or remove some vendors for which you're going to collect consent and inform about the user consent status. From a consent management platform standpoint, we give you the choice to select any list of vendors that you may want to work with. So some of our clients choose to work with all possible ad tech vendors out there, and this represents a list of hundreds of vendors. Others prefer to work selectively with a subset of this gigantic list. Both approaches have merits in a sense that when you add everyone on the list, you are sure not to miss anything. It has a cost, because the hidden cost behind this approach is that some of your personal data is going to get to vendors which are never going to bring you any money, and who might use this data to their profit without you benefiting from it. and that's typically called data leakage, and like a practice that is very frequent, unfortunately, in the ad tech ecosystem. So, but on the other hand, by selecting all possible ad tech vendors and correctly distributing consent status to any of them, you make sure not to miss any opportunity. If you restrict the list, the main merit is that you become rare on the market, so you're only available to a selected number of vendors and their advertisers. So it might lead to higher CPMs, especially if you have a very niche audience that is particularly attractive to specific advertisers. This might be a good strategy. But again, I think the best way to approach this question is to learn by experimenting, by playing with this list of vendors you're going to collect consent for. It's a process that is very straightforward within the Didomi CMP. So it's really a matter of selecting vendors and unselecting them. And this choice will automatically add the appropriate purpose for which you will collect consent, and will automatically activate the integration, such as the transparency and consent framework, with which you can distribute the consent status. Next slide, please. So we've seen two things so far. So how to get the best return on investment. First, focus on your consent rate, maximize the number of opt-ins you get through various approach. We have seen that when you have done that, the second aspect is to ensure you maximize the monetization side of things. So you make sure you work and integrate the right vendors. The last bit to maximize your return on investment is to really focus on where deperdition may come as an app developer collecting consent. And there are very technical things that explain why you're not maximizing your revenue. First, the CMP choice has a tremendous impact because poor performing CMPs will lead to less revenue and will lead to a deperdition coming from late consent collected. So opportunities missed because the CMP was loaded too slowly, didn't work, etc. Next slide, please. So the slower the CMP, obviously, the higher the deperdition. At Didomi, we take this question really at heart. We make sure that we take into account the mobile aspect of mobile apps. So the fact that your internet connection may fail, and so all the operations handled by the Didomi software development kit, on Unity in particular, are local. So we don't depend on the network. We also have worked hard to make sure consent is immediately shared as soon as it's collected, so that there is no time lost, milliseconds lost between the moment where the user has consented and the moment this information is made available to your vendors. And we really see that as a core part of our service to make sure we bring you the best possible solution there. Next slide, please. Then I think providing the functional and excellent integration with the ecosystem is crucial. So let's take an example here to see the impact in terms of revenue that just sending out invalid consent strings, invalid consent status may have on your revenue. So if you take a million ad slots on which you assume an 85% consent rate, let's assume that on average you make €3 CPM on these ad slots. So it's approximately a theoretical revenue that you may get of €2,775 for these ad slots. Now let's assume that what your vendor is going to see is only 65% of your ad slots that are consented, because for the rest of them, so for the 20%, for some reason the consent string that they received was not readable. Some information was lost in translation, and so you immediately see that this like the slightest impact on invalid consent strings is going to affect your revenue. And actually, for large mobile app developers, the difference can be massive. So it's going to be painful very quickly. So that's why we insist on these aspects that are very often overlooked by app developers when they think about consent. It's not just about complying with obscure GDPR rules. It's much more about ensuring that you take into account all the technical and performance aspect of adding a new SDK to your app and making sure that it works out well in terms of revenue. Next slide, please. So to summarize the key learnings of what we just presented, we have some kind of model that you can keep in mind. Next slide, please. About the benefits of delivering the best consent experience to your user and to your business. Consent benefits can be broken down into 4 categories. First, by giving out control to your end users, you're going to create trust. There is a direct effect in trusting your users to make the right choice. You can obviously inform them about the consequences of their choices. On this aspect, there are interesting developments around the notion of cookie walls, so paying alternatives to consent. We more on that later on another webinar if you're interested with the topic. But fundamentally, I think it's something that you shouldn't underestimate, and that the easy solution is obviously to get all your users to say yes in using some sometimes dark patterns. But fundamentally, as an app developer, you want to have an engaged audience of satisfied users. And making sure that you trust them is one aspect of it. The second thing that is critical is to focus on performance. So performance at all levels, performance in maximizing your consent rates using the best practices that we've seen, maximizing your revenue by selecting the right vendors and really bringing the best possible integration with these vendors to transfer them the consent status in time in a way that is readable and functional. The third benefit is about compliance. So you will sleep better at night if you're compliant with GDPR. No risk to have the CNIL or any other data protection authority knock at your door and start fining you for things you overlooked, even if the risk is not very important. It's still a risk, and we've seen especially in France, the CNIL focus on these on some of these aspects very early in the GDPR days. And the last benefit is just about operational excellence. So as an app developer, you're working really hard, you're sweating all day long to deliver the best possible user experience. You shouldn't give up on that for things related to consent. You should really try to embed into your user experience the best possible way to present and ask for consent. You should also make sure that this new SDK that you're adding is correctly integrated and fully functional and respects the reasons why you selected it, and all these elements will translate into higher revenue. And as we've seen, this has been measured by the likes of Google and other studies that we can discuss if you are interested. this translates into higher revenue eventually for you as an app developer. So that was the wrap up for this session and for this masterclass that we've presented. Obviously, the rest of the content is still available if you missed earlier episodes. We are also always available to you for to discuss all these things. And if you're interested to test our Unity SDK, feel free to reach out to us. Next slide, please. In the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them in the question sections. And yeah, we'll be happy to answer.